Thank you everyone for joining us for the last career speaker series of the term. For those of you who are new, haven't come or haven't come in a while, my name is Claude. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Computer Information Technology Department here at Delgado. And my department puts on these career speaker series to just kind of let students hear from real people who are working in the computer technology professions that they are studying and concentrating in and hoping to get careers in one day, and just kind of hear how those professionals got where they are. So today we are super duper excited to have Mr. Alton Johnson of Bonahey Security with us. Alton is from New Orleans, like many of us. He got started hacking at age 11, and now he is the founder and principal security consultant of Vonahi Security. And Alton was gracious enough to come here and share his career journey with us today. Here is Alton Johnson. Alton, take it away.
Yeah, my name is Alton Johnson, and I'm the founder and principal security consultant for Bonahey Security. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and then I'll kind of dive into some background about how we got started. So Bonahey Security, we're basically an automated ethical hacking company. Basically what we do is we help companies protect themselves from cyber attacks by identifying their flaws before the bad guys do. So a lot of the things that you see in the news nowadays in regards to companies getting breached, this company got hit with ransomware attack, this company has a lot of credit card data stolen. Basically companies like mine would help find those types of issues before they actually happen, right? And so we've taken the human element out of it and automated the exact same process that cybersecurity consultants used to do, pretty manual. So basically, just a little bit of background about myself too. So as Claude mentioned, I kind of got started at around 11 years old. I was just one of those kids that was just bored of school and just wanted to like get into just bad things, right? I was addicted to the computer. Basically, somebody hacked me back in the AOL America Online chat rooms, and they hacked me and actually showed me how they did it. Thankfully, the person was pretty nice enough to show me how to do it, because at that time I got very addicted to that process. I was like, wow, it was that easy to hack me. I wonder how easy it could be to hack other people. So I started going into chat rooms and just like messaging random people, trying to convince them to, open up like a file that I sent them. And if they open up the file, basically I would get access to their computer. So I didn't really care too much about what they had on their computers. I was just mostly curious to know if I can actually get on their computers. And after I did that, I just moved on to the next person. So I did that for several years as a kid. I stopped kind of hacking illegally when I hacked the cop and freaked out because I found out, right? So I unplugged my computer and I was just like off the computer for several days. I was just super paranoid. But eventually I got back on the computer and started learning how to code in Visual Basics, which is a very basic programming language, hence the name Visual Basics, and started writing up tools for AOL back in the day. So as I got older, I realized that you can actually get paid to hack, which for me was exciting because I was doing it, just because I was bored and I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't realize you can actually get paid to do it until I got much older. So in terms of like my school background, when I was 16, I got a little bit bored and kind of fed up with some of the school. That was also a little bit right after Katrina. And I got tired of like bouncing around from school to school. I already knew what I wanted to do. I love hacking, I love coding. And so I got my GED. And right after I got my GED, I started college, basically taking up computer networking. At the time, I wanted to do programming because I was really good at it. But Louisiana Tech at the time was kind of telling everybody that programming wasn't going to be a big thing in the future. So computer networking was like where it's at. So that's what I did. I went there for 2 years and graduated with a technical diploma. And the first job that I got right after, well, during my last semester was at LSU. And so I was working at LSU for just basically doing basic IT support. The cool thing is that I had a lot of opportunities there to kind of expand my knowledge because they didn't really have a big IT team with the department that I was working at. So I had a chance to like kind of teach the web developer how to like do some things with the website and kind of create like a forum and stuff like that. So it was really cool. From there, I went to a federal credit union because at the time LSU was basically saying, "Hey, you're getting ready to graduate. This is a student position. You can't work here, if you're not a student." They ended up giving me like extending a contract to me for about 6 months, and then after that, I had to move on to another position. So I started working at a federal credit union in IT, doing basically computer networking. So I was like monitoring the firewalls, managing the switches, doing help desk support. And I was still kind of, I still had my hacking thing kind of going on at the time. So I was still like on my free time, just learning how to use Kali Linux, which is basically an operating system that, cybersecurity consultants use to assess networks. I was using that at the Federal Credit Union just to kind of like get familiar with it and poke around a little bit, kind of trying to stay on the radar. So I was there for about 2 years, and eventually we hired a company called Trace Security to come in and do a cybersecurity assessment to basically do the same thing that we do now, which is identify flaws within the Federal Credit Union's network, provide them with a report to show them exactly what their issues are and how to fix them. And so I had applied there and got the job because I was very interested in what the guy was doing. I had never saw it in person, like somebody actually, an actual hacker, right? How many times we really run across somebody who hacks, and that you know that they do that. So I applied at Trace, and got the position, just doing some basic support stuff. I was super excited, just to be working around a bunch of hackers, and every single opportunity I got, I was going over to the other department, asking the other guys, hey, if you ever run across something cool, let me know, because I want to know, I want to watch, I could figure something out, I can study more at home. Like I was super, super, super interested in learning like what they do and how they do it. So the good thing about starting off in the basic support there is that whenever they had an opportunity to get promoted or bring somebody else in, I was like an easy person because the guys already knew me. I was already kind of like collaborating a little bit and kind of passing some ideas back and forward based on what I was learning at home. And so it was a very easy transition for me to go from very basic support to actually working as a consultant. So while I was working there at Trace for about 2 years as well, I was working on some certifications as well. One of the first ones that interested me at the time was one called eLearn Security. They're very underrated nowadays, but they have some really good content. But basically, it was a certification called eLearn Security Certified Professional Penetration Tester. And the purpose of that course at the time was to kind of help an entry-level cybersecurity consultant like myself at the time to get familiar with the content, understand what some of the tech, some of the terms mean, and kind of what some of what social engineering mean, things like that. And right after I got that certification, I went for my OSCP, which is Offensive Security Certified Professional. That one is a really highly respected certification, especially at the time, because not many people had it. I mean, people had it, but if you had the certification, that really meant that you knew what you were doing. So you couldn't just open up a book, remember everything, and then and take an exam and pass it based on memory. You had to actually like dive into research, kind of understand what you were doing, think out the box. So that was very challenging. When I got that certification, I had an opportunity that opened up for me at a company called Accuvant, which is now called Optiv. Accuvant was a really cool cybersecurity company at the time. It was one that they were kind of like the place to be if you worked in cybersecurity. Anytime you went to a conference and you had an Accuvant shirt on, everybody was like, "Oh my God, I love you. How do I sign up? How do I get started? Can I buy one of your shirts? Who's selling the shirts?" Like it was the place to be. And so when they saw that I had my OSCP, basically my interview was, "I see that you have your OSCP. I'm not going to ask you any stupid questions. Tell me how much money you want and when can you start?" And at that time, I really understood the value of having an OSCP at the time, because I was basically able to point out my own salary. I mean, I couldn't say like $4 million, of course, but I really had a lot of wiggle room to kind of play around with the salary. My salary pretty much doubled from where I was at the time to go into that company. Um, and the way that interview was, not only that, but they also wanted to set me up with a lab, which is basically they create a customers network. You have to hack it, and you have to write up a report on what the issues are and how to fix those reports. And the whole purpose of that entire practical exam is to understand that your OCP is legitimate, right? So you basically have to do exactly what their consultants do on a day-to-day basis, but in an exam. And so they want to see how you present your report, how do you communicate, do you translate all of the technical issues to something that actually makes sense? Because a lot of people are not like very technical like us. Um, and so that was a really easy way to, not easy way, but that was a very interesting way to get started with that company. So I worked there for about 3 years almost, and sorry, about 2 years actually, and had a really good time. Worked with a lot of great people. I was always just like super motivated to like learn more, do more. At the time, I was even writing tools and scripts that other hackers today use at a variety of cybersecurity companies. Um, so I've got a pretty good amount of industry recognition from some of those tools, just from people like, going, oh man, I wish I had a tool like this. And then I wrote it. And then like they were able to use it on their assessments to make their jobs easier. So then they shared it with other people and it just started kind of trickling its way around the industry. So, and again, I love coding. So I really was super excited about the opportunity to write more tools. So at the time, Accuvant, they merged with a company called Fishnet and became Optiv. And one of the things that started kind of sucking was the culture. So typically, when there's a merger of some sort or different management, people either start leaving or just the culture starts changing. Now you're working with other people who don't respect you because you're like the opposite. You know what I mean? From a different company. So I went to a company called Direct Defense at the time, and I really had a lot of fun there. A lot of people who went there from Accuvant after the merger, and I was just like one of the last people to kind of trickle in from the previous company. Had a really good time there. Really did a lot of large engagements. I've done a lot of assessments for really big companies over the last, 7 years. Walgreens and CVS and Dollar General, like Nintendo. Some really cool clients, some really cool networks. So a lot of really cool things from companies that have a lot of money to just play around with their networks. Um, but to kind of fast forward to today, one of the reasons that I started Bonahey Security was because, as a cybersecurity consultant, you do a lot of the same things, right? So you go from one company to the next, and the beginning of what you're doing on those networks is pretty much similar stuff, right? You have to start off by sitting down, plugging into the network, and kind of running some initial scans to understand what the client's network looked like from the beginning. And then from there, you kind of tailor your approach to what you see. So I started writing tools to kind of expedite that process because, one thing that any hacker, cybersecurity consultant, ethical hacker, whatever they want to call themselves, we all hate writing reports. We hate doing the thing. We hate the documentation. We just want to hack, have fun, and do all of the cool stuff. Nobody wants to sit at the end of the week writing up a Word document, copying icons back and forward. Like that's extremely annoying. It's extremely time consuming, and it just doesn't make any sense to us. Um, so one of the things that you see a lot in this industry is you see people who are very, very, very technical, but they suck at communicating and writing reports, or you see people who are really good at writing reports and communicating, and they just suck at the technical stuff. So um, I wanted to basically expedite the time that I was spending on each engagement. So I took a reporting process that usually took consultants like 12 hours and condensed that down all the way to like 20 minutes. And I was able to produce the same types of reports that my coworkers were producing at the time. So that's kind of what drove my passion for now, automation was basically saving time, right? If I can save more time doing my work, then I can spend more time doing less repetitive tasks, which could, provide more value to the customers. So that's pretty much where I started getting the idea. At the time, the company I was working for, they were kind of already doing things manually. They were trying to do things automatically, but they were struggling a lot. I had proposed some ideas on ways I could help do that. I had already done it and was just trying to kind of, you know, slide that into the company and get paid for it really. But they already had their plans and, they were still, trying to tackle that challenge. And so I eventually went out and started Vonahi Security, where now we're basically doing all of the things that I wanted to do under another company and more. So now we're taking the entire 40-hour work week that a consultant would typically spend working with the customer, and we're automating that entire process. And it is something that, it- today you kind of, everyone has heard of AI. But 5, 10 years ago, you would have been like, AI, yeah, it's just technology. Sounds cool, but it's not going to really do anything. And so that's kind of what we're seeing today too. Now we're automating an ethical hacking assessment. We're taking a 40-hour work week and we're just clicking a button to automate the entire process from start to finish. And so it's something that people are slowly but surely starting to believe in as time happens. As cybersecurity attacks, as cyber attacks start to occur more often, and the cost of that is starting to get higher and higher, and there are more and more companies being formed and being attacked. People are kind of having to second guess whether or not whether something like this could really work. So I think that's a really good transition that we're starting to see over the last few years. Um, let's see. In terms of some of the other certifications that I have, I started off initially with my A plus. That was when I was working at Louisiana Technical College, or going to school there, and that was basically just kind of entry level to computers, how to replace hard drives, things like that. And then I got my network plus. I'm sorry, my security plus. And then it was right around that time CompTIA was announcing that if you don't take the A plus, security plus, or network plus by next year, anyone who takes it after that year starts will have to renew it every 3 years. And so because I wanted to get the network plus so I don't have to renew it, I went ahead and took that. I also have my CCENT and CCNA, which are certifications by Cisco, as part of my classes at Louisiana Technical College. We were kind of working with Cisco routers and switches and kind of managing those. And at the time in school, it was a lot harder than it really was in the real world. When I started working at Trace Security, I realized that everybody around me had their CCNA. And so at the time in school, I thought the certification was extremely hard. But then I realized that everybody on my team had the certification. It changed my perspective entirely on how is it really difficult, or is it just the way that I'm thinking about it? And so once I kind of twisted my mindset, I was able to get that one in just a few months. And then I also have a certification by Microsoft, Windows 7, one for Server 2008. And those were, again, kind of going towards help desk, managing servers, things like that. And the e-learn security certifications, as well as the offensive security certifications, are the ones that I've taken. Those are the last three that I've taken that are most relevant to cybersecurity. But yeah, I think that pretty much kind of covers some of the background and kind of where we are today. And I would love to maybe kind of, answer any questions and kind of, understand some ways that I can help provide some value for everyone on the call. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned that you were using various and sundry tools to do your scanning and your that type of thing. What language are you using? Which language is, from your perspective, most popular in your, in what you do, so that folks can understand exactly what they might want to pursue? Thank you, man.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. Yeah, so one of the languages that are most relevant in the cybersecurity space is Ruby and Python. Pretty much 90% of the tools that you'll run on ethical hacking assessment, you don't need to know those languages, but they're very helpful if you do. For example, a lot of the tools that I've written kind of just help me save a lot of time, and those tools are written in Ruby and Python. You can most certainly, use the tools that are out there, but what you find in the community nowadays is people start on projects, they publish it to the community, people use it, it's cool today, and then things change in 2 years. And so those developers are no longer developing those tools because they've moved on to something else. And so if you don't know how to basically read those languages, or even try to poke around it and try to figure things out, what you'll find is that the tools that are no longer relevant today will basically make you kind of, you'll have to kind of you'll constantly have to keep looking for tools out there on the internet that actually work. Whereas if you know how to code in Ruby or Python, which they're very similar languages. So if you know one, you can very easily kind of adapt to the other one. But if you know at least one of those languages, you can either take those tools that are dead and modify them so that they work today, or you can write your own tools so that they last longer. But Python and Ruby are the most common languages. You may see some tools nowadays that are written in Perl, but it's not that often. You may also see some tools that are written in C++, C#, but That's more of a, you can kind of use Python and Ruby to code some tools that would typically be written in those languages. So it's not necessarily required to learn like C sharp, nothing like that. But I don't even know C sharp and don't care to learn it either. So Ruby, Python, and maybe a little bit of Perl are probably your most relevant languages.
Thank you, man.
No problem.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Did you ever have to go to the lower languages, for instance, assembling or anything like that? Would that have helped you in any way, shape, or form?
So the only time I learned assembly a little bit was when I was taking my offensive security certified expert, the OSCE exam, and that was mostly for like exploit development.
Right.
So when you kind of have to take a look at some tools and debug them down to like, assembly to understand like exactly where they sit on the CPU registers, how to conduct like buffer overflow attacks and, writing shell code, things like that. That's when it's most relevant. But from a penetration testing, ethical hacking perspective, it's not something that you're run across a lot on a typical engagement. But if you go into like a field where you're doing like more malware research and exploit development, then you'll probably want to learn, those languages a lot more than you would if you were just doing like pen testing, things like that.
Okay. Any interfaces, I guess, and I don't mean to dominate the questions, but when you're doing your scanning, and hacking and things of that nature, obviously we have national security, the FBI, CIA, those kinds of folks. Do you ever have to interface with them? How does that work? So for instance, right now you're an ethical hacker. Let's say you were the other kind, coming from the dark web and that kind of thing, you were trying to do hacking. What kind of defense mechanisms would you take to protect yourself from being scanned and that kind of thing? Thanks, man.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things so at Bonahey Security, we kind of have like a zero tolerance hacking policy. So what you'll find on a lot of networks nowadays is that whenever you try to do something malicious against a website or a server, basically you get error messages saying that, oh, not found, or, oh, bad input, something like that. And the problem with those types of, but so you have that, and then you also have some other like layered approaches where you have like an application firewall, which basically sanitizes your input and then eventually blocks you if you do it too many times. But at Vonahi Security, what we do is we know how people are going to interact with us normally. So in the event that you do anything the first time malicious, then we basically treat that as, all right, this guy is up to no good. Like, for example, nobody should be browsing to our website and typing in /administrator unless, they're trying to poke around. Some people, I mean, it's very easy to detect when people are up to no good and to get rid of them immediately. Like, no one should be going /administrator, /admin, /login. Basically, a malicious attacker would try to do that to try to find a login page, right? So the first time somebody does that maliciously, we just, the first time they do it at all, we just block them permanently. There's no reason nobody could accidentally type in those things. So rather than like kind of filtering things and waiting for like multiple occurrences to happen, we just simply treat the first offense as like malicious and go from there. So I guess that's the first thing. But then the other thing too is, social engineering is also a very common thing that happens nowadays to basically, phishing attacks, right? It's a form of social engineering where basically somebody sends an email and they try to pretend to be somebody else, impersonating someone like PayPal, Amazon, etc., and they try to get you to click a link to give your information. So from my perspective, in terms of defending myself that way too, I'm just very like aware of any kinds of emails that come through. I'm very suspicious about every link, even the ones that are internal, because I know there's going to be phishing emails that try to, appear to be an internal email. So I'm always just kind of like hovering those links, understanding exactly where they're pointing me to. If I go to those links, even if they look legitimate and it asks me to download something, I'm usually not going to download anything unless I'm intentionally looking out to download something. So some people they click on links and, something says, oh, you've got 10 viruses. Would you like to clean them? And they hit yes and they download it. And next thing you know, they're done, So just being kind of aware too helps out a lot.
Thanks.
No problem.
So I guess to go off of his question, you'd started out hacking, and now doing ethical hacking. So let's say, someone says, "Oh, I'm interested in doing this." How would you suggest someone explore that field without, say, stepping on the toes of like hacking a cop kind of situation?
Oh, gotcha. so, so the good thing nowadays is that a lot of companies are doing what they call bug bounty programs. So companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, LinkedIn, they all have bug bounty programs where they're saying, "I want you to hack me, and if you do successfully, I want you to follow this process to let us know how you hacked us, the entire process, and what you were able to accomplish with that. And if we deem that as a security issue, then we're going to pay you." Some people have gotten 10 grand from something very simple. Some people have gotten $100,000 for finding something that could simply take 15 minutes. It's just that no one has run across those things to even look at them. So there's a lot of bug bounty programs out there that encourages people to hack them, because from their perspective, they would rather pay you $10,000 to hack them and find a flaw versus somebody doing it maliciously and then costing them $1 million to recover data, to announce it to the public, losing reputation, having to pay for data recovery, things like that. So it's cheaper for them to pay you to hack them than it is for them to pay for the damages. So there's a lot of bug bounty programs that are out there right now. The other things is that there's a bunch of vulnerable virtual machines that, there's a site called Vonhub, VULNHUB.com, where you can go and download virtual machines that are all vulnerable. So you can download those virtual machines into your network, and you can target those systems, with something like Kali Linux to try to hack those virtual machines. So there's a lot of labs out there as well that you can sign up to kind of simulate like a real network. They weren't really so available, I would say, 10 years ago, but today you can go to offensive security, e-learn security, even just search, pen testing lab or hacking lab environment. And there's a lot of companies out there that have those environments that are very cheap, actually. Not, I wouldn't say cheap, but they're like $200 maybe a month. And you could probably sign up for like 3 months just to like really spend some time to understand, how to get into it.
Just got a chat. What is the salary range from entry-level positions to the top salary you made before establishing your own firm?
Yeah, definitely. So, my first, so yeah, that's a good question. So the base, when I first got into the first cybersecurity company, I was making 33 grand a year. That was just doing very basic stuff. It wasn't even doing the hacking. When I got into the opportunity to do it at the other company, I started off at 70 grand. The top salary that I ended off with was 181. I would say that you can probably expect to start off at a cybersecurity company. Like if you get your OSCP, for example, and you participate in the community, you try to learn scripting languages, you can show that by creating tools. I would say you can probably start off at least around 80 or 90, especially nowadays, because it's getting harder and harder for companies to find talent. And so when they do find talent, they want to make sure that they pay them really well so that they don't like leave. And it's also a thing too in the industry where companies are just constantly, people in cybersecurity constantly jump from job to job to job. And companies know that. So they want to start you off at a good salary so that you can stay there for some time. So I would say on average, probably like 130 after like, maybe 2 years or so. You should be, if you really push forward and you really stay on it, you don't get comfortable, you're constantly writing tools and, getting recognition. I think that's a pretty decent average.
So I know you had mentioned, obviously, with the OSCP, you got to be able to say, here's the money I want, like the job was kind of there. Did you find that certifications were a big gateway for cybersecurity, maybe more than traditional education? I asked this not to put you on a spot because I know you're doing it for a community college, but because of the fact that we have sometimes students who are like, maybe they're struggling getting through the thing, like through the whole degree, but want to find an alternative way to not make their time go to waste.
Mhm.
And we usually say, you should be getting your certifications, go do your certifications. So I guess how has certifications opened doors in ways?
And if you don't mind, let me follow up with that. Certs are extremely important, and I know you're going to address that. But have you also had challenges with not having a traditional degree, so on and so forth? You know, a salary of a six-figure salary is nothing to sneeze at. But some of the more formal companies, the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, have their requirements in terms of certs are very important, but also a degree one way or the other, whether it's 4-year or 2-year, they also demand that. So has that been an issue for you going?
Gotcha. I haven't had any issues not having a degree. It is something that if you have somebody with a degree with the same certifications or the same type of experience and you have somebody who doesn't, they're probably they will choose the person who has a degree. But I think cybersecurity is because even when I was kind of growing up and getting into the industry, I was constantly told, if you don't have your degree, you won't make it far in this world. You won't make it that far in the industry. But cybersecurity is just a different beast, right? It's something that you can't find a lot of people with or without a degree who are really good at doing it regardless. And so the people so what it kind of boiled down to over the last, I would say probably like 6-7 years is that because of those issues, they set up things like practical exams where they put you on a network to see if you can hack it and see if you can communicate. And so basically, a lot of companies have just kind of started going towards that, where if you can prove to them that you can do the day-to-day job and you can communicate it and you can make the money, then they'll get you on board. Like I've worked with people who had, you know, it's kind of crazy to even think about this, but I've had managers who were like, you know, had like 1 million tattoos, no degree, piercings, you know, pink hair, constantly at cybersecurity conferences, just like completely, just had a lot of different things going on. And the fact that he was so good at his job, he was able to, like, it was a breeze for him to kind of walk around through the industry. So I don't necessarily know if that's something that in cybersecurity you were running into quite often today. Maybe, you know, 7 years ago it would have been more of a big deal. But I think the reason why a lot of these companies like Google and Facebook are dropping some of these requirements and allowing people who have equivalent experience and or certifications is because they're noticing that there are people who actually don't have a degree who are just as talented, who could provide a lot of value to the companies. The certifications are definitely something that is, if you graduate with just a degree and you start to apply, it would be very tough to really land a really good position without certifications, because certifications, they help validate that you can do what it takes for that particular job. Like when it comes to like ethical hacking, right? These certification exams like OSCP, for example, they set you up in lab environments that are just like customers' networks. So if you can make it through there, then you've kind of passed the first round of testing confirmation. I'm not sure how to say that, but that tells you that, or that tells them that you can for sure hack systems. You've provided a report to offensive security that was good enough for them to give you the certification. So you must be good at writing reports. So they test you on some very specific and technical things that a lot of cybersecurity consultants do on a day-to-day basis. So it kind of validates that you can kind of be like a plug-and-play solution for a missing person on the team, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So in a sense, your actual capabilities and showing your capabilities are more of a interview than the traditional interview, correct? Because
exactly.
they look at what you can do as opposed to what you have on paper, right? Certs are certainly important, and I would not do anything without a certification. But if you can show me what you can do, that's even more amenable.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yep, exactly. And that's super important. I would say, like, you know, what you can show is probably number one. So me personally, even at my company, if I had somebody who didn't have any degree, who didn't have any certifications, but I saw that they wrote so many tools, they're very knowledgeable in the area, they're super hungry for more knowledge, and they're just like amazing. Like I wouldn't even think twice about it. I would say, okay, well, they can provide a lot of value. It's really about the, you know, you may have some customers who may ask, what kind of certifications does your team have? But that's not really that common. I've only had one or two people ask that in the last like 2 years. But someone who can actually just like get in there and do the job, I mean, that's really like that alone like says a lot. So, but yeah, I totally agree.
Gotcha. And also, you never stop growing because, as you said, reports will be required. You have to be able to communicate. So those things are important as well. Just wanted to make sure that wasn't overlooked.
Exactly. Yeah, that's super important. Something like, so it's very interesting because in cybersecurity, especially ethical hacking, it's so confusing to even people who need to do it, right? A lot of the reasons why you see ethical hacking assessments or pen testing engagements go on is because of auditors. Like if you process credit card transactions, you have to comply with PCI, and PCI requires that you do a penetration test. PCI is payment card industry. So a lot of companies just do it just to check the box. And sometimes they may run across issues, and the same issues persist from year after year after year. And part of the reason behind that is because the person who's doing the work isn't effectively communicating what the risks really are. It's one thing to go in and say, oh, I've hacked your entire network, I've got access to everything. That means nothing to an executive. They don't care. They're like, okay, what does that mean? Like, how does that equate to potentially a $500,000 ransomware attack or $1 million ransomware attack? Like, how does that translate? So whenever you can present the report effectively and communicate how those issues actually affect their business and what that can actually mean, then it starts to make sense. Like if you tell them, hey, I have access to all of your credit card data, as you know, PCI requires that, if there's something like this happens, then you can get fined and things like that, then you can start to translate those risks into like how much it can actually cost them. And that's when it starts to make a lot more sense. But then you have a lot of guys who are just very technical and they just want to dive straight into the specific technical details. And at the end of the day, no one really knows what that means. So yeah, reporting and communicating like with the issues in those reports are definitely super important. If you can hack really well and you can't communicate, you might not last long at that company.
So going off that, since it sounds like there are a multitude of skills that are needed, what for someone who might be thinking, hey, I'm interested in this, what kind of main core skills, hard or soft, do you find would be valuable for someone to have or hone to get in this field? Like you said, if they can't communicate well, they might not last at certain companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just like in terms of like, I think communication is probably the biggest thing. Even if you're not super technical, but you can communicate, what the potential risks could be for that business if something, was to happen. That's really a really good valuable skill to have. Another thing too is, and it probably sounds cheesy, but I would say personality too. Like having a good personality on the team is something that me personally, I find to be super valuable. Like, because you have some people who are very technical, but they don't like talking to people. They can't they give you attitude and they don't like to share their knowledge and, things like that. That's toxic. Like no one wants to work with somebody like that. You got this guy who's basically in his own bubble and he's not sharing any information. He's not providing value to the team. Then that's not really providing a lot of value to the company. So, as crazy as it sounds, I think, having a good personality and just being open to learning, open to accepting that you're going to make mistakes and don't know everything, which is a big deal in tech in general. You have a lot of egos where people, they assume they know everything. And if you tell them something that they don't know, then they assume that they try to, oh, I know that already. Or, like they just have this attitude. So, I think, I don't know. I know it sounds cheesy, but personality really goes a long way in this industry too.
Hey, I had a quick question. For people that don't have a lot of experience and for an industry that seems like there's no real entry-level positions, how do you recommend getting a foot in the door?
Definitely. So the first thing that I would do is take a look at some of the courses. My personal recommendation, I don't get paid to like, for, for referrals and nothing like that, but e-learning security for me was a really good, like kind of, entry point, because that course taught me a lot of like what some of the terms are, what ports and protocols really meant, and how you could abuse those ports and protocols. Um, Also, like of course, like with offensive security, they have some really good stuff. There are other companies out there that have certification. I know CompTIA has a Pen Test Plus certification as well. Um, I think that once you get into some of those courses, the good thing is that, at least what I found from those courses, is that they taught me enough to be curious to learn more. Right? I didn't feel like after I took the certifications, I was good and I was ready to go. Like I was still curious to learn more. Like I found myself constantly researching throughout those throughout the courses, more information and more knowledge from other areas and bits and pieces on the internet. And from there, I was able to kind of get curious to, oh, well, the course is telling me how to do it this way. But they also mentioned this in the last 2 pages. I wonder how I can do it that way as opposed to this way. And so you start to like go down this rabbit hole, and next thing you know, you're like 6 hours into researching. But I personally like courses a lot because for the prices that they cost, they provide so much value. Like for example, the OCP, I think that was like $1,200, but that landed me a $70,000 job, like a month or two later. I'm not saying that that's guaranteed to happen, but it's you have a really good chance of making a lot more progress if you take a course. But then the other thing too is if you can try, because nowadays, everybody's remote. Remote work is extremely, it's been a thing before COVID, right? For pen testers, because hackers, it doesn't make sense it's hard to find talent locally when it comes to hacking. So a lot of cybersecurity companies have had to reach out and look over, accept applications from all over the world. And so it's made kind of building a relationship a little bit more difficult, but you could probably just even go out like randomly and call up a company and say, hey, I'm interested in working for you guys one day. I would love to, if it's possible, could I talk to a security analyst or consultant just for like 10 minutes, just to understand like what they do on a day-to-day basis, what certifications they have, and just kind of like build a relationship, because that doesn't happen. So for a consultant to get a random phone call or some type of meeting from somebody who's interested in the field, they're going to be like, oh, wow. They're going to, want to learn more about you, if they're a good person, of course. But it could really help because they may keep you in mind. Y'all may, communicate regularly. And whenever there's an opportunity, they may be the first person to tell you, hey, man, there's a job opportunity coming up. So I would try to definitely build relationships as much as possible. The other thing too is go to, well, after COVID and all that stuff is over with, like there's DEF CON, which is in Vegas every year, but a lot of cities have their local conferences. And DEF CON is big, for those who don't know, DEF CON is basically a cybersecurity conference that is held in Vegas every year, where all hackers, both the good and the bad, they meet up and they just get into trouble in Vegas. They talk about the research that they've done. They talk about new security vulnerabilities, new exploits. They share knowledge, code. They have like challenges. And a lot of a lot of cities have their own little like mini DEF CONs or little cybersecurity groups that meet up. And so just kind of building relationships that way too can really go a long way. I met up with one guy in New Orleans at the time, just randomly, and didn't think anything of it. Just was like, just hanging out. I was with a few guys, and next thing you know, we had a customer on the phone. It turns out that this guy worked there, and so he was able to vouch for us, and we were able to get the contract. So relationships really go a long way in getting started.
But as far as like an actual entry level position, would you recommend starting out at like help desk or something along those lines?
Yeah, definitely. If you can find a help desk position or something entry level at a cybersecurity company, even if it has nothing to do with hacking, just to get in that company, right? Assuming you'll probably be doing that for 6 months to a year. If you can do that, you could definitely ease your way into learning more about what some of the hackers are doing on the other team as well. Another good thing too is even if you get into a company that's not doing cybersecurity, you know, having experience in IT in general helps out a good bit as well too, because the learning curve, like they want to, let's say a cybersecurity company is looking for an entry level associate ethical hacker, right? If you apply there and you work at a federal credit union and their primary customers are federal credit unions, you know a lot about how credit unions work, right? You know a lot about the technology. And so that could be a transition for you to go from working at a federal credit union, for example, to working at the cybersecurity company, because having some general IT knowledge really helps when it comes to learning um, cybersecurity, because a lot of the stuff kind of crosses over pretty easily.
Oh, this is a question from in chat. Did you require a significant capital to start your own firm?
I didn't. No, we didn't go with any kind of investors, any loans. It was just me kind of pulling out of my savings, which I didn't have a lot of in my savings at the time anyway. But kind of going back to relationships, the way I started my company without any capital, without any real capital, was I probably started my company with about $5,000 to $10,000 max in my savings at the time. And so basically, I was able to leverage the relationships that I built with other companies. So I worked at 3 companies at the time, and a lot of cybersecurity companies do 1099 work, which is basically contract work. So typically, they get overloaded with a lot of engagements, and so what they do is they look for contractors who are available to take, you know, engagements from time to time. And so I was able to leverage that opportunity with one of the companies I used to work for to kind of help me put some more money in the bank. And then I was able to go over to another cybersecurity company that I had known, because I used to work with some people at a cybersecurity company who they all left to go to this one company. And I was able to get them to vouch for me to their manager as a contractor. And so I was their primary contractor, and they were able to just start funneling me engagements left and right. And so I was able to use that to put more money into the bank. And then at some point I realized that, hey, I'm super busy. If this company stops giving me engagements, I am screwed. So I have to figure out a way to take the money that they're giving me and reinvest it into the company so that I could continue if they stop. And so that's why I was able to kind of take some of that money and invest in other people to help out on the team. And I think that process is kind of a rinse and repeat situation, kind of just growing in general.
And so how big is your company now? Do you have folks that are helping you with admin? Because as you're super busy, you have to have people, you know, admin assistants and that kind of thing helping you out. Also, in terms of the folks who have the skill set that you do, how many folks do you have?
Yeah, definitely. So my team now we have 7 individuals on our team. Where basically all of that kind of came from, you know, just the same process, like rinse and repeat, and also some other opportunities kind of landing in between there as well. But I also have probably 24 contractors that I could reach out to. I use like 2 of them primarily for most of my engagements. Even though I used to work with those 20 folks at other companies, I like to kind of keep my circle of contractors really close, especially because of what we're doing in the automation space, you know, and not having a bunch of money to just kind of play around with like a lot of other big companies. I want to make sure that it's the stuff that we're doing are with people who are very, you know, highly trusted, respected, and can help us grow without having to, without me feeling uncomfortable about giving them access to some of our stuff. So, but yeah, I have I would say about 24 contractors who I used to work with that, you know, depending on the workload, if things were to go just absolutely crazy, we could expand to giving work to them as well.
Gotcha. And you mentioned automation. Are you using standard automation tools, or do you write your own tools? What are you using now to help you out?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was working at my last company, I started developing a platform to automate my reports, because I had a client on the West Coast that was going to have a report so big that it was going to take me like 2 weeks to write it. And so I spent the entire week writing and understanding how Microsoft Word documents work. And I was able to automate that entire process. And I was able to take that and start applying it to future reports as well. And so from there, I was able to start automating some of the assessments that I was doing on site. And eventually I started writing, I kind of converted that into a platform, which it's a web application, which I had to learn I had to learn the language on the fly, because I was that tired of writing reports. So it took me an entire week. So the platform that we're using now for automation is something that I wrote. And I would say about a little bit over a year ago now is when I got some help from the development team to kind of manage like the front end of the application, which it's in a language that I know that I've had to learn, at the time I was writing the report. So we kind of collaborate. But it is a tool that I wrote and kind of now co-developed with another person, three other people. And the other part of the automated platform is that we're automating tools inside of Kali Linux, like Metasploit, Hydra, Nmap, all of those tools. We're basically chaining the entire process of a real attack, cybersecurity consultant. We're chaining their logic together into code. So we're just basically chaining a bunch of their tools that they would typically use together. And kind of, there's just a bunch of conditions that determine whether something was successful, not successful, second steps, third steps, things like that. That makes sense.
Sure. One last question for you, because I think this is fairly important. You're doing cybersecurity and you're doing security. Could you speak about networking and how important it is that someone in cybersecurity understand something about networking? Because I don't think a lot of folks understand the significance of cybersecurity. You see it a lot in your security plus certs and that kind of thing, but networking is very important. So if you just speak to that for a few minutes, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, networking is pretty critical, right? So for example, you can't really efficiently learn Python, Ruby, Perl. You can't really learn programming languages until you understand how networking works, because those types of languages, you're actually interacting with networking services. You have to understand, like with those languages, you have to understand what exactly is happening in the tool or the script that you're writing, right? You have to interact with a protocol. You have to understand how the protocol works. You have to understand how it responds, what it's looking for when you interact with it. And so that's super significant. If you don't understand like what happens when you click on, when you go to your web browser and you type in google.com, if you don't know how that works, if you don't understand the steps that your web browser and your computer are taking to actually know what google.com really is and what to do with that information that you're sending to the web browser, if you don't understand that, then you can't write any kind of tools in any scripting or any language at all to do the same thing, because you don't know what the web browser is doing. So when you start to understand what that means, then you can write a tool that basically does the exact same thing as your web browser, because you understand the underlying technology and the networking that's happening underneath it. So that's super critical. And that works for all like networking protocols, right? You can't really hack a file server if you don't know what a file server is or how it works or how to manipulate it. You can't manipulate it without actually understanding how it actually works. So it's that's super critical.